Welcome to the Devhouse Podcast, your window into the Metaverse. I am Jim Welch, your host. I'm here with Christian Black today, your co-host. Hey, Christian.
Hello there.
So, today we brought Christian on because we're going to be talking game design, and he's our resident designer in-house. Also does programming and a bunch of other tasks as needed, of course.
I wear a lot of hats.
Yes. Yeah. Any sort of small to medium size agency, I think, can kind of relate to that. We also are going to have Austin Grossman on today, and so we'll be introducing him shortly here. But first, let's go ahead and dive into the news. All right. So the news we are talking about today, I'm sure everyone who is kind of aware of the world is kind of aware of NFTs. Those are becoming a very financially interesting space. People are spending a lot of money on these things. But what's kind of interesting today is Ubisoft announced that they are going to start playing in the NFT game. So specifically, the NFTs are going to be given away. I believe they're not for purchase initially, and so I think they're kind of trying to be careful because there is a lot of negative, I think, connotations and energy, especially in the game industry, about crypto and NFTs. So it's kind of like how can we kind of explore this, without alienating too many people.
Yeah. From what I've seen, they are keeping it pretty similar to microtransactions, but as a testing the waters, they're just giving it out for free.
And then it's powered by Tezos, which I don't know a lot about, but I was chatting with Eric a bit earlier, and he was saying that they're a little bit more environmentally conscious. So a lot of coins are pretty expensive to the environment. It leaves a big footprint to mine, and so that's something that we as people in this space need to be considering and thinking about as we kind of are trying to be responsible with this new technology. We internally have talked about some NFT stuff, and we're exploring some spaces, but it's cool to see, Ubisoft is not some like indie darling game. So it's not like they're a studio that we can look to as like a pinnacle of like, oh, they're in it for the love and not for the business, but they're not as, I guess, notoriously sort of CEO gross as some other studios, right?
Yeah.
I know Blizzard's sort of the villain right now with some stuff that's happening.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so I think if Blizzard announced this, that would just be fuel to the fire of like, oh, anything that Blizzard does, let's add on to that because it's some bad stuff going on over there. But hopefully they can get that kind of fixed up. And it's a challenge for these larger studios, I think, it's like, how do you grow as a business without alienating kind of the creative folks and the people that love your products, and do it in a responsible way. So yeah, we'll see how these come, how people respond to this. But I'm hoping for hopefully positive response, and it goes well and it's done properly. So cool. Well, let's jump into Dev Abomination. So today's Abomination, kind of segue into that. I mentioned we're working on some NFT stuff. So you can't tell by looking at our mega kid, or omni child, as we like to call this. But basically, this is a thing that often happens early in our prototyping, where we have maybe like we'll use Cinti assets a lot of the times, which is a third-party development studio. They'll make a bunch of 3D models, and they'll do something where they put the skeleton for like 10 different avatars. So you have like 10 different kids, and they'll all share the same skeleton. You drop it into something like Mixamo to animate, and you get like this culmination of all of the things into one. And it can be kind of fun. Now, this particular one isn't that same scenario. This image that we're looking at has a bunch of kids just slammed into each other because we're trying to build basically digital figurines, and they just happen to all be on the same origin, and makes kind of a cool blob of person. So what do you think, Christian? Should we create this one? Is this a 3D printable?
I think this is the rarest one.
Yeah, so there's one of these, and it comes in foil.
It's the holographic edition.
Yeah, we'll dip it in like aluminum dip it or something. Yeah, but yeah, so we're gonna be working on this, and we'll talk more about that on some show where it's a little bit more like finalized, and we can show some pretty pictures of it. But yeah, that's our Abomination for today. Let's talk about some gear. So the gear we're going to talk about today, this specific exact thing I actually don't know too much about, but it made me think of all of these similar peripherals that I have experienced, and it's sort of a leaping off point. So the Hobo Loco is basically just a peripheral to help you move without mouse and keyboard and kind of traditional controller. It kind of uses your feet to sort of move about the space. I've seen a number of these. Have you tried any of these type of peripherals before?
Like a treadmill?
Yeah,
Or
a treadmill would be like that.
no, I've never tried anything fancier than just the Vive.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was at Exxon briefly, and when I was working there, in their VR on their VR team, they had one of those, like, things that wraps around your waist that
Oh
you walk
yeah.
on, and it's weird, in your head, you think maybe it's like a cool, like, treadmill, but
Hmm.
really, at least the one that I used, it was just a slippery sort of concave, like, dip, and then you put on these, like, slippery little, almost like medical shoe things, and then it makes your feet slide. So really all you're doing is you're just like, you
Huh.
can't get traction, and then that gives you the
No,
motion.
I feel like I'd want the traction from a traditional treadmill
Right.
than
And I
sliding around.
and I think there are some of those, and I think those are probably a lot more expensive and
Hmm.
more rare, because to get an omnidirectional treadmill is probably pretty complicated from an engineering
Yeah.
standpoint. But so I've tried that one. I had a friend try another one of these kind of foot control experiences, and he said he just hated the thing. But I'm looking at this one now. It's a hoverboard without wheels. In front of it sits in front of the user on the floor. Unique scheme of navigation control requires a little effort to move the avatar. Yeah, the challenge is just, does it feel good? And you never kind of know until you try it, and you can't try it until you buy it in most cases.
Yep.
So eh, and then the game has to support it. I don't know if they have some kind of interesting drivers to where it's like, oh, it's just like a D-pad or
I
something.
I would hope it outputs vector 2
Right.
based on like what it's reading as a foot
That
input.
that's smart. Yeah, I mean, to put something out like this, that's probably a good point. You really just have to have it give data that most games can interpret. Scroll down a little bit on the screen here. I want to see what that next. Let's. Oh, there's some of their prototype stuff. That's interesting. So they have some patents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's leaning like the actual hoverboard.
Yeah. Right. Right. Those things terrify me. I feel like I'd kill myself if I
I don't like them, and I spend my free time on skateboards.
Okay. And I imagine that's probably pretty different from a skateboard, because on a skateboard you're like on the side,
It's
right?
so uncomfortable being shoulders straight while you're
Yeah.
going forward,
It's
and then having to lean forward, stop. Like everything that I've learned from like skating or snowboarding says it's wrong.
Don't do that. Yeah. Yeah. I've never had the nerve to step on, because you see some of those videos where people step on and
Hmm.
then they'll immediately like
Yep.
eat it because
Yep.
they'll lean a little too
Yep.
much. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, yeah. Well, that is our, I almost said dev abomination, but it might be great. I don't want to say it's an abomination, but there hasn't been a lot in this space that has worked well from my personal experience. It's either too expensive or too bulky or too much of a unitasker. Like, oh, for this one game, it feels
Yep.
pretty good. Everything else, it's useless.
What's difficult about these things is that you have to prototype them, and you can't do that without actually building it. So like a lot of effort
Right.
has to go into these kind of products for them to be good in the first place.
Yeah, but I think there is a space for it. I mean, haptics are really important. You know, we did the glove. We talked about the glove
Mhm.
recently, that Meta is building, and it has like these little kind of air pressurized things, and you can feel things. And I'm excited about that. Maybe because it's just novel, and I haven't seen
Mhm.
anyone do that well yet. But something about, locomotion in VR is really challenging, and someone needs to solve it. I think, it
Yep.
doesn't feel great to teleport. You get nauseous when you're just sliding around the space. So I hope one of these works out, and someone's like, yeah, we use it, and it's amazing, and then it kind of can proliferate as part of, like, it comes with your Quest. You
Yep.
buy a Quest 2 and it comes with this thing that,
Yep.
or at least is sponsored by that company. So that was our news, not our abomination. But now we want to jump into our main segment. Like I said, today we have Austin Grossman, and he was so kind to spend some time joining us today. Hey, Austin, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good.
Awesome. Well, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell everyone about how cool you are. You've worked at some cool studios. You've worked on some cool games. You're working on something that's very tech forward right now. So, and we're gonna dive into those. But give people a glimpse into kind of who you are and what you do.
Right. Well, like a lot of people in the, emerging uh, XR, et cetera, space, I have a, have a bunch of different backgrounds. I worked in game design in the 90s and 2000s principally, doing kind of long form narrative immersive sims, like basically, long form action adventure, but incorporating a lot of simulation-y emergent narrative and gameplay. Started with System Shock, Deus Ex, Dishonored, are some of the games.
Wow.
Then I went on to be director of game design and story at Magic Leap, the mixed reality hardware company. Somewhere in all of this, I got a master's in theater, most of a doctorate in English literature. I've written a bunch of novels. Anyway, right now I'm dividing my time between literary stuff and I'm a co-founder of QXR Studios, which is a small studio that does narrative and story worlds in some different media. AR, we have a lot of expertise in AR, so we're going there right now. We just launched Metropolis Origins, which is an online NFT collectible card game. So that is a lot of stuff in a short space.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
super. And what interests me too, and I'll is sort of your split of focus between kind of more traditional, writing novels and as a writer versus interactive narrative design. And I guess a question right off the bat I have is like, how do you, I mean, I don't, it's not a fair question to ask if you have a favorite maybe, but how do you get different things out of those? Like, do you feel like each one fulfills a different part of you creatively, or how do you feel about those two spaces?
That's a very good question. The first, writing and publication I did was in video games, and it did a good job of fracturing traditional storytelling for me. And ever since then, I've been unable to tell a proper story in chronological order. It always jumps around. It taught me to be very spare with language because, of course, nobody wants to read too much in video games. They just want to click through the dialogue. And the first time you start clicking through your own dialogue because you're already sick of it, you realize that using too much language is a luxury, and it teaches you a little bit of humility.
Sure.
Probably the biggest way it fulfills different things is that doing a novel, you have total control and you're doing it by yourself. Doing games, you're building stuff collaboratively, not just with your coworkers, but with the player, the person on the other end. You're kind of collaborative storyteller with whoever's playing your game and working with the system you've designed. So they are very different and complementary, which is good because I get bored very easily.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that team element is really unique. I mean, I can sort of relate to my early years. I played in a lot of bands. I was a music major, so I was used to working with ensembles. But then I found a challenge in sort of taking that ensemble to a kind of professional capacity, to where then I worked kind of on my own. And so as a business person, I found more success individually, but I missed the sort of camaraderie of like when you work with somebody and they do something you didn't expect and you're like, oh wow, or you kind of happen to both be on the same page creatively and you have that moment of sort of shared discovery, which is
that excitement.
special. Yeah, because it's hard to just excite yourself,
Yeah.
that to keep that sustained. So I would love to hear more about the game you're working on now. That's something very topical to kind of the category of our podcast. And so I definitely want to spend a good amount of time hearing more about that. So can you kind of give the explanation for those who may not be super familiar with what NFTs are and how do people interact with your game? How do they play it?
Sure. Well, I'm going to start with the game side. Metropolis Origins is a collectible card game, somewhat on the model of Magic Gathering and Hearthstone, and used a lot of the game design principles from those. We have our own slightly different spin on it. It's a faster game. It's easier to pick up. It is a little more spatial. Where your cards are on the board matters to how they play and interact with other cards. So it sneakily has a little bit of that roguelike or chess feel, which I feel like hybridizes very, very well with the card space and makes it feel new.
Oh yeah.
It's also an NFT game. The cards, you buy the cards as NFTs. You can collect them. We're even at this very moment building a whole system whereby you can play to earn, you can craft the cards, you can meld them together. It's a new space for me. I came to it from immersive sim design. It's my first card game, although I found a lot of the game design principles carry over very well. But what we learned the moment we launched is that the NFT card game design space is actually quite not totally different, but has a whole bunch of extra considerations and expectations from players. So we are all learning in real time, which is kind of great. Almost all of the game design I've done work with has been on emerging technologies, and it's very interesting to see this new one.
Right. So
Yeah.
that brings up kind of a point of design research, right? So Austin mentioned that like there's a certain expectation from the community of NFT collectible card games that might be different from like a purely, Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh or something.
Yeah.
When you do a design, Christian, do you tend to like research similar titles? Like let's say you're going to make an RTS. Would you play a bunch of RTS games or do you go on instinct or?
I actually prefer to know less about the genre I'm working for, so that way it feels more like a me thing, and what
Sure.
my ideas of the genre are, and then I will incorporate actual genre tropes into the project as I work on it, because like it's still fun finding out the problems on my own and then seeing how did this game solve that problem, and like
Right.
will that solution work for me, or do I need to look elsewhere?
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah, you want to make sure your voice isn't accidentally influenced so heavily
Yep.
that you lose your voice.
Yep.
That's very interesting. I think for somewhat similar question for you, Austin, but a slightly deviation of why an NFT card game versus just like Magic the Gathering, like right now, if you can play a digital version of it and you can have a card and it's your card and you can trade it. So what inspired you guys to kind of focus on like blockchain and try this other new space?
To be honest, as far as I know, we wanted to stand up a game real quick, and we didn't want ourselves too tied to VC investors. And we thought, oh, this will be a quick, easy way to do it. And that was
Yeah.
the first idea.
Yeah.
And then after that, we had to like plunge into the NFT and crypto spaces and learn how those works. But I think actually we just kind of got sick of chasing money to
Sure.
start our game, and see we
Mhm.
were like, let's start it right now. Here's a way to do it.
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some internal discussions about, the sort of what would be the word, like morality? I don't know if morality feels heavy, but choosing to
Yeah.
make NFTs and is
Mhm.
it the right choice? And I'm excited about it, and I think most of the team now is also on board. But
Mhm.
I know there was some initial resistance, and we had to have a conversation about, okay, well, what is that resistance, and why is it bad to do something that there are a lot of good examples of. Like, sure, there's some silly things like like the Bored Apes. Like, why is that picture worth so much money? But is it hurting anybody, or is it just sort of silly? And kind of diving into some of those pain points. And I imagine we'll have to do the same for consumers.
Yep.
So there's a niche of people that already like this stuff, but it's not. I wouldn't say there's mass appeal. Like
Mhm.
if I go to my sister's friend or something, like they're not gonna know probably like, oh, I have these 5 NFTs. They probably maybe they heard about it.
Those would just be letters to them.
Right. So it's like you get this niche and you get people willing to spend a lot of money because they see the potential of value.
Mhm.
But then I think there's a second phase of now there's just the not sort of monetary value, but just the sort of just inherent value of like, I like this game. I like that I have these cards as mine and they're possessions, digital possessions of mine. I have these contracts for
Mhm.
them. That can be exciting in itself. And I think
Yep.
that's the next phase of getting past just the investor mentality, which I think most of the NFT space
Yep.
is in right now. So, okay, another question for you, Austin. So I actually, funny enough, just in another recent podcast, we chatted with Dave Shumway, who is at Magic Leap with you as well. He's a good friend of mine from way back when. He does
Super talented guy.
yeah, super amazing. One of the kindest persons I've ever met. Good guy. When you were at Magic Leap, what was your experience like there? Do you have any like really special moments of discovery, like as you're doing some of that design that you're like, oh, this works, or oh, that does not work?
There were a lot. I mean, it was such a new space. There were a lot of discoveries that we made. I mean, the moment when I felt like this is a new real thing is when, I'm used to you're making a video game, you got your editor, you compile your shit, you go to test it out, and you're like, okay, you're gonna load a different file and I'm gonna play on my laptop. The moment I realized that compile stuff, I export it, and then I stand up and I walk into the middle of the room to test it, that felt so different. Your body's engaged, all the senses and parts of your brain that deal with a 3D space and the intuitive affordances of your body, it changes everything.
Right.
Um, there's so many difference. Early on, there was kind of a lot of panic because it's like, oh, we can't design a level, like we can't control the geometry, and you have to step back and think about that and realize that you absolutely are not. You're not designing the world. What you're doing is designing systems that interact with existing geometry. Right? Yes, whatever.
Okay.
You can instantiate a screen or a board or whatever. But the paradigmatic example I take is like virtually a rubber ball, like a digital as a digital object, right? Any room you're in, you can throw it against the wall. It'll bounce around. It'll do it differently depending on the shape of the room. And so what you end up wanting to do is design systems that will grab onto any different room you're in and play differently in every different room. And suddenly you're leveraging all the complexity and variety of the real world, added to which you're allowing people to play the way they did for most of human history.
Right.
Like in the world with your body, with 3D space.
Right.
It is absolutely different. And you take inspiration from playground games, from bar games, from parlor games. I could talk forever about this, but it is a fascinating, interesting new space.
Yeah, it almost makes me think of when we actually modeled our office recently for like arranging desks and for some marketing material, and I was really excited to like build a game in our office like digitally. So we have this like duplicate. So like let's build a game as this is a level, and it's like, well, with the Magic Leap or HoloLens, you could just do that. Like you don't have to model the space. You're just already in here, and now you're fighting zombies in your office, and like that could be kind of a fun idea. And I think you mentioning playground games makes a lot of sense because it feels very much like a kid experience of like I'm in my bedroom and suddenly a monster comes out from under the bed. Like that's cool, maybe scary, but that's cool. And that's a neat thing that you can do. And it also made me think of, you mentioned your use of AR sort of spatial in your card game, and I thought that was really innovative. I haven't seen, I played Hearthstone. I used to play Magic growing up, and I don't recall. I want to say in Hearthstone there was some like adjacency rules and things like that, but spatial is really interesting. Are you in your layout board? Are you still in like rows, or how do you kind of work the spatial element?
I mean, the initial launch is just super simple. Like you have a row of six spaces, they have a row of six spaces, and every card is unique, and every card reacts differently to its position on the board, what's positioned around it. There's we started super simple. Like there's the lone wolf card, right? It's powerful when it's by itself, but if you put a card next to it, it depowers a whole bunch, and suddenly you have a bunch of tactical considerations. Yeah, I want to put all the cards on my board, but I need to leave those one or two spaces open to leave my lone wolf being powerful. And suddenly that's the kind of moment when a simple card game starts taking off as posing fun tactical decision making in real time. And we added from there what's across from it. I can place stuff on my opponent's board and change things, and sometimes it's a trade-off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That it'll empower some cards and depower other cards. and suddenly you have a lot of emergent, cool gameplay happening in your PvP.
Yeah, emergent gameplay is interesting. I know that was a really hot topic a number of years ago, and I still find it very fascinating
Mhm.
that the idea that you design a game a certain way, but other types of gameplay emerges
Yep.
out of those systems, and a lot of that is similar to what Austin was saying. Is like building
Yep.
systems allows for emergence, and I always find that fascinating, and I
Did,
like to incorporate that in designs.
did you say it was a topic a couple of years ago? Because I still feel it's core to what games are and what games are becoming. Did it go out of style? I
No,
missed that.
I would say it became a talking point a few years ago, and then it stayed as a really large design influence for like the
Yes.
last 10 years.
Yeah, it was definitely like, hey, here's this thing concept, and then everyone, it was like the buzzword, right? And then now I think, as Christian said, I think, yeah, it's there as a tool that we all hopefully consider when we're designing, and choose to what degree we want emergence. I'm going to put you on the spot, Christian. If we're about to do a game jam
Mhm.
here at Devhouse, we're going to have a game jam day, and so if, let's say, the theme was games in the metaverse, like,
Mhm.
what kind of experience would you create to like define metaverse with a video game?
Um, is this just for a jam
Yeah,
for the
so for a
day?
jam, so
Okay.
it doesn't have to be some big picture. Like, what platform do you see you building it on? And
Um, maybe something like an AR RTS kind of game.
hmm
Just like spawning a bunch of uh, entities onto the ground and then being able to control them and tell them like, hey, walk off that desk, or like light that paper on fire, and then build like maybe other environmental systems or like elements. So like, oh, you lit that on fire, so like I'm gonna make another group that can put that out,
right.
and then using tools like that to build opposing forces. And then your game loop would derive from like enemies coming in and like disrupting your environment.
Sure, I like that. And I start, as you described it, I'm picturing these little sort of like tabletop
I
size.
almost like Pikmin. I
hmm
Niantic made that new Pikmin game for AR, and I haven't played it myself, but the ads for it are awesome, and I
Yeah.
love the way it looks.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the idea too of like kind of tying it into like from just AR to sort of like a higher metaverse concept of like maybe some of your units can like, I know some of the early Red Alert games would have like, and probably other RTS games as well, would have like upgrades. So like your character could get more kills, and then
Hmm.
it would become stronger and
Hmm.
get like more stars. And so you could almost have like these characters like be in your bedroom and just be like on your nightstand, and
Yep.
you like interact with them, and then now they go into battle, but they're stronger
Hmm.
because you've spent time with it and you've
Yeah.
interacted with him.
Yeah.
uh,
I've been really intrigued by like Tamagotchi kind of stuff recently,
yes, yeah,
with like that long-term relationship building with the player.
yeah. Same question to you, Austin. If we were to say, hey, come up with a game that's, you have a weekend to build, what would the framework be if the theme is metaverse?
Yeah, well, with metaverse stuff, I really try to break out of existing video game genres as much as possible. Uh, the immediate thing I think of is a game that most people don't remember that was on your phone called Bounden, which was basically it used the accelerometer of the phone to kind of lead you through a kind of choreographed dance that you had to
Mm.
cooperatively do with somebody else. And I really like that idea, getting people to walk around, getting people to move. Like, I mean, I can almost Bowden, and I can see building a game that was halfway between moving through a choreographed ballet, halfway to Twister.
Yeah,
I think it's
Twister,
finding out
man.
what happens when you get on your feet. Or
Mhm.
uh, what was that game that they did? Was it Johann Sebastian Joust?
Yeah, I
Do you
was gonna
remember
bring that
that?
up. Yep.
That's such a great example of a
Yeah.
metaverse game, and a genre of game that has barely been touched, but is so rich.
Yep. Yeah, I remember every GDC, you'd always see a bunch of people playing that upstairs in some of those halls. But yeah, for people who haven't seen that, it's a game where you would have the PlayStation Move controller, had the little like sphere, colorful thing.
Mhm.
It was, I guess, the response to Wii, I assume. I
Yep.
think if I remember the timeline right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you would have this thing, and it's almost like a fragile egg. Like, you can't move it too fast, or it would trigger and you're out. but you're trying to hit other people's. So it's like, hey, I want to knock you out, so I'm going to go hit yours. But if I move too
Okay.
fast, then I mess mine up. So it's an offense and defense
Yep.
game. It's super cool. But yeah, hardly explored.
The fact that they took the controller and ditched the screen
Yes.
was
Yeah.
just a
I
kind
love
of
it.
genius stroke.
Yeah, because you would see, because it has a light, so it can notify you
Yeah.
of like, oh, you're out, or you're moving too fast. So yeah, super cool. Well, I want to make sure we save time for our questions. So we have 5 questions we ask everybody. Me and Christian will sort of take turns. I think Eric wrote these, and his handwriting is pretty enough that we can both read it. So first question for you, Austin. What is the metaverse?
Metaverse, I typically think of it as a planned system for surveillance on behalf of a kind of totalized late capitalist consumerist regime and or state security apparatus, if those can still be adequately differentiated.
That was the best answer yet.
I mean, that's so much of the reason why you see money pour into XR companies is because and why Facebook is pushing it, because the degree to which you broadcast personal information as you use an AR system, I mean, it is orders of magnitude past any social media system currently existing. So I think that drives investment in it more than anything else. I mean, you can add in Department of Defense stuff. So that's mainly how I think of the metaverse, is a coming dystopia. With some, game applications that sort of
a fun dystopia
peripherally out of it.
That's a fun answer, because we you get a lot of variations, and so I love the difference of opinions, and the sort of it brings up the point that there needs to be caution and how we responsibly handle this technology. Or you want to get that next one, Christian?
Yeah. What is the coolest tech you expect to see in the next 5 years?
Well, outside the digital space, I would say wind-powered container ships. Have you seen the pictures of those things? They're awesome.
Yes, I actually have.
Within the digital space, augmented reality, accessibility tech.
Okay.
The things you can do for deaf and blind people and people who need help speaking are amazing. The moment I saw an AR, like American Sign Language interpreter, that could read hand positions and read them out to people who don't know ASL, it is a game changer for a lot of people, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to be able to help people with technology and not just make entertainment. What tech do you expect to fail in the next 5 years, or go down in popularity?
Right, or as opposed to tech I hope will fail. I mean, leaving aside the internal combustion engine, I think we're probably going to see one more generation of failed head-mounted wearable AR stuff. I'm not sure what else I can predict. Obviously, VR is kind of on the bubble, right? Where it hasn't found its killer app, but it's so cool anyway. I feel like it will subsist in its niche, the way, say, animation or the graphic novel has, and it will at some point find its place. I wish we had time to go more into VR storytelling and what's happening there. But,
we'll have to do another episode for it.
We'll have to do another episode.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I like the concept of maybe VR won't go away, but it might just become a permanent niche. Right now it is, but most people assume it's just because it hasn't hit the adoption, but it may potentially always be that, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
It might already be at its plateau.
Right, and then other spaces will grow.
Okay, the next question. What is your favorite interactive experience?
Apart from voting in a democratic election, I'm a huge fan of Blendo Games, and Brendan Chung works out of LA. You guys, Brendan Chung is like a weirdly undersung genius. When I played 30 Flights of Loving, I just thought to myself, this just fell out through a time warp of 30 years ahead. When people actually have understood what interactive narrative feels like. I have no idea why he's not more wildly popular, but that's the thing I always recommend to people. You know, and what are the others that he did? Gravity's Bone. Is that, am I thinking of the right thing? Anyway, everything that guy touches basically is so fantastic.
It's awesome. I love the indie game space. It's
Have you been? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's
I was-
where I want to spend all of my time.
I was gonna ask, have you been watching any of the Skin Deep video streams from
Oh,
Blend?
I have not. But they must be fascinating.
Oh, they're pretty fun to watch just to leave on during the evening.
The final question I have for you for our 5 question. Oh wait, no, I lied. This is question 4. What is your no, that's right. We already asked you your favorite interactive experience. So final question. What interactive experience would you like to see? So something that's not out there yet, but you're like, man, I wish someone would make this.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I have a whole wish list of things that mixed reality will do at some point. I think a lot of the top choices are things like, I want an AR app that can really teach me to dance. It is so freaking embarrassing to learn social dance, like swing dance and waltzing on the rest of it. Like, I just want something that will teach me to do it in the privacy of my own home, so that by the time I go out, I already know how to do it. I mean,
Right.
speaking more seriously, like, I feel like it's an under talked about thing. Augmented reality apps that do things that will teach you things that allow you to connect to people off device, right? It's not all about when you're wearing the device or using the device. It can teach you things that you know, augment your life even when you're not sitting there looking at the screen.
Right.
Yeah.
So something teach me to dance where no one can watch me. That is what I would love.
Well, I think that's a sort of a positive way to look at the metaverse, is that yes, there's technology. I mean, a lot of the definitions are kind of about the intersection of technology, digital, and reality, and most of the time that kind of comes in the flavor of overlays and you know, basically the visual connection. But I like the idea that you kind of propose that, well, maybe there's something digital that impacts my experience in the physical, but not at the same time. You know, I recently started using VR like boxing games for fitness, and the one I normally use is more just fun. It's like Beat Saber, but I just started using Supernatural, and that one has like more instruction of like how to box and how to properly swing, and I found it like, oh, I didn't actually know how to do this, so I did learn something. So I found that pretty satisfying from a user experience.
Yeah, it's both terrifying and wonderful that the formerly, you know, the glass wall has become permeable.
Right.
I hope it is more wonderful than terrifying.
Yes, yeah, we can hope. Yeah. So, well, Austin, you know, I appreciate your time coming on. We're gonna have to have you back on and talk about some of the VR storytelling and some other cool things as we go. But is there, if anyone wants to connect to you, ask you cool design questions, talk to you about your game, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, it's good to reach me on. Personally, I'm on Twitter. You know, Twitter Grossman Books. Which is a username I came up with to troll the rest of my family who also write. Grossman Books on Twitter or through my website personally, and then Metropolis-Origins.com is where you see QXR's new game, and it's fun already, and it's just beginning. All the things we're going to add to it.
Well, yeah, we love, you know, we know a couple of folks on your team, and now of course we've had time to talk, and so, you know, we definitely believe in what you guys are doing and the talent on your team. So I think it'll be something really special, and appreciate the time, and looking forward to connecting again soon.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Awesome.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Austin. So today's episode's sort of about design in the metaverse. I think Austin put it well. Oh, I wonder if people can hear our sirens. We're in downtown Dallas, and there's a police and fire truck. But Austin kind of brought up the point that, you know, there's some risks and there's some things you have to consider.
Yep.
Like, okay, if I want to build an MR experience where it's using my space, well, how do I use that space? I can't design a corridor in a level because maybe you don't have a corridor in your house. So you know, what are your some closing thoughts on how people need to look at design for AR and VR, and maybe the idea of this sort of like digital, not simultaneous, but a digital connection to the real
That
world.
actually really spoke to me,
Yeah.
was the like using AR to carry not just digital you forward, but the real existing real life you forward with like educational skills. That's personally my favorite part about the AR experience so far, is
Right.
just how much you can learn from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And we're working on like a historical app right now,
Mhm.
which will be interesting, and it's located in a place where there's not a lot of information readily available to
Yep.
people. There's like some weird people handing out brochures on the corner kind of thing. So it's like, is that the source of truth you want? And how can, maybe we can't get an expert down there because the city can't afford it or whatever the limitations are. But if you can have a piece of an app educate, and
Mhm.
especially with AR now, you can use the space and talk about the space.
And actually making it interactive.
Yeah, then it can compel people to actually use that instead of some random person pointing with their conspiracy brochure. So awesome. Well, I think design is going to be deviate into a ton of smaller subjects, and we're probably going to have many more design episodes. But this is a nice kind of like intro to
Mhm.
metaverse design. And so, obviously follow us. We're on Spotify. We are on Apple Podcasts. We are also on YouTube, which is always what we recommend because we have videos that we like to show. So until next time, we are Devhouse, and we'll see you then.